part of this wonderful series of speeches. As you know, tonight the topic that was chosen was Zaman Cherutenu, taking control in a world that is totally out of control. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me that the world we're in right now is as out of control as we've probably known it for a long time. The situation of what the virus has done to the world has turned everything that we understood to function in one way, has reversed it and turned upside down. It's interesting, just over the past 2 weeks, I've been trying to bring my 2 boys home from yeshiva, and I reflect on the fact that this time last year I was doing pretty much the same thing, trying to bring them home from yeshiva, and what is normally a very simple task of arranging flights to bring them, whether from England or from Israel, back to Gibraltar, was so complicated. So many different arrangements had to be made, so many different plans we had to come up with and then cancelled, so many different forms, different tests had to be done. So difficult and so much uncertainty. And this is the world that we're living in today, a world full of uncertainty, a world where we try and plan the next step, but it's impossible to predict exactly whether things are going to work out. Even now, as things seem to be clearing up a bit, and we approach the summertime, and we expect maybe we might have a summer holiday, we might have a decent summer, but there's so little which is known ahead of us. Governments are doing everything they can to try and organize things, to try and be one step ahead, but it's impossible. There is so much that just lies unknown. There's so much that we cannot see ahead of us. And everything we try, every step we try and take step forward, we end up taking steps backwards. And if there's ever a time where we feel out of control, it really is now, because we can plan how we're going to run our week, and then suddenly we get a call from contact tracing. We were next to someone who was positive, and now we have to isolate for a week. We send our kids to school, and the next thing we know, they're back home again. It's impossible to live a life in the situation that we're in and consider that we have some sort of control. But if we were truly to be honest with ourselves, this is not just something that is COVID related. Even in times pre-COVID, life as a whole, the landscape of life is a rough terrain. It's a terrain which has mounds and pitfalls. There's all sorts of things that are coming our way all the time, which we have to dodge and duck, and we have to avoid, and we have to learn to deal with. Our situation, even on a regular day-to-day, pre these times, was always had periods of times in our lives where things were out of control, where we found ourselves sort of gasping for breath, trying to understand how to deal with the situation, how to manage the situation we're in. There are many times in a person's life where this feeling of the out of control takes over, and it paralyzes a person, because there's a basic human need to want to feel some degree of certainty, to want to have some level of predictability, to be able to see ahead of themselves at least a couple of steps, to be able to make plans. And when a person is not able to do that, it's extremely disconcerting. It's extremely debilitating, and it paralyzes a person. And a person feels helpless, hopeless, and totally out of control. And the question, therefore, I would like to deal with tonight is living in such a world, which, as we know, has only exacerbated this issue. But the world we live in anyway is a world where there are plenty of times where we are out of control. So how do we take control? How do we live a life where we are in control when life by definition is out of control? How do we deal with life? How do we maintain our balance when we're constantly on the receiving end of all sorts of curveballs? And I think the first thing I'd like to say before we begin is something which I'm sure many of you will find extremely counterintuitive. And that is, it's my belief that the crux of this issue is not rooted so much in the reality of the circumstances, nor in the challenge that we're experiencing, but much more in the way we relate as individuals to that reality. And I find this so powerful, I'm going to repeat it. The crux of the issue is not rooted so much in the reality of the circumstances that we face, nor in the challenges that we experience, but much more in the way we as individuals relate to that reality. And in order to understand this, I'd like to break this down from a macro level to a micro level. And let's take what may appear to be a very, very trivial example. But I think when we put the microscope on this trivial example and understand the dynamics at play, we will be able to glean some very, very important lessons which will help us on the macro level. So let's imagine for ourselves the following scenario, a scenario which many of us may have experienced in the past. We have a mother with a number of kids at home, and she has a very important phone call to make, a phone call which she estimates will take about half an hour, and she has to go into a room in private to make this phone call. The problem is there's no one to look after the kids. So she takes the kids and puts them in the playroom, and she opens all the drawers and says to the kids, help yourself, you can play with anything, mommy just has to go in the other room and speak on the phone, please don't disturb me. Anyway, off she goes to the other room on the phone, and she has this conversation. And half an hour later, she comes back to the room and to the playroom, and she opens the door. And what meets her eyes totally shocks her. Utter, absolute bedlam. Every single toy of every description is being taken out of the cupboards, is lying on the floor, strewn in every direction. All the colors from the pencil cases have been taken out and used liberally to cover every single surface and to give a total makeover to this playroom. And she doesn't know where to put herself. She's totally overwhelmed at the sight. She doesn't know what to do, how to deal with it. And she just can't face it. She wants to collapse on the spot. She grabs the kids. She can just about wade her way into the room. She takes them out and she closes the door with a slam. And off she goes to give the kids supper, trying to pretend this didn't just happen. I'm sure many of us can relate to something on this level happening. But anyway, a couple of hours later, she's firmly put the situation out of her mind, at least for now. She puts the kids to supper, she puts the kids to bed, and then she remembers there's a room in the house which has total mayhem inside, absolute bedlam. And as much as she'd like to postpone it even longer, at the end of the day, it has to be dealt with. So she makes her way over to the playroom and she opens the door slowly, hoping that maybe some pixie had come in the meantime and picked up some toys for her. But as usually the case, that wasn't to be. She sees the room in exactly the same state as it was left. And she takes a step forward and then she stops. She just can't do it. She's totally overwhelmed by what she's facing. She just cannot step into this room. She doesn't know how to deal with it. And she stops and is about to retreat. And then she realizes she cannot escape this any longer. It has to be dealt with. It can't be left to tomorrow. It's only going to get worse. So she knows that she has to do something. She steps back for a moment and thinks she's got to come up with some sort of idea, some sort of plan, how to deal with this situation. She thinks for a moment, what can she do? And then she decides what she's going to do is like this. All she's going to do is go in the room and spend the next couple of minutes picking up all the toy cars. Wherever the toy cars are in the room, she's going to pick up these toy cars. She's going to ignore everything else that's in the room. She steps in the room, feeling a bit more refreshed, feeling a bit more invigorated, and she makes her way through the pile of mess and starts picking up one by one the toy cars. A couple of minutes later, the toy cars are now packed neatly in the cupboard. And then she thinks to herself, okay, now I'm going to start with the crayons. And she starts picking up the crayons and putting them one at a time into the pencil cases, ignoring everything else as she's going about it. And she does this item by item, one thing at a time. She does one item and ignores everything else, finishes that item and then goes on to the next one. And within 45 minutes, suddenly the room is looking clear. Most of the toys are back in the cupboard. The pencils and crayons are back in the pencil cases, and she's able now to wipe the surfaces. And she succeeded in a task which she thought was totally impossible. Suddenly what was totally out of control has now been taken back. Control has now been taken back. Now, I know this seems a very trivial example, but in actual fact, this particular scenario highlights for us something extremely fundamental. Because we have to ask ourselves, if this mother, when she first stepped into the room, when she first opened the door and saw what was inside, was so overwhelmed and she just wanted to walk away, she felt that total lack of control, total loss of control and inability to deal with the situation. She felt helpless. She didn't want to deal with it. But then suddenly she was able to have the energy to deal with it. And before long, she was able to deal with it. So what was this transformation? What happened over here? What changed in between the first step and the second step? And you can give many reasons. But I'd like to share with you my idea. And I think the idea over here is not so much about the fact that she reduced it step by step. I think that the crux of this idea was she was able to focus. And when you focus and you have clarity about what you're about to do, the mission you're about to perform, so then suddenly you feel control once again. When she first walked into this room, she saw a room full of everything everywhere. She didn't know where to begin. She didn't know which toy to start with. She didn't know how she was going to deal with this. She saw the totality of the situation and it was impossible for her because it was confusion in her mind. There was a total lack of clarity, how she's going to deal with this situation. And when one has lack of clarity about the mission one's about to perform, about the task that lies in front of them, about what has to be done and how it can be done, that lack of clarity leads to lack of focus. And when a person does not have focus, it's impossible for them to feel control. Then what did she do over here? She decided to just concentrate on one toy at a time. What did this achieve? It had achieved that she was not looking at everything in the room. She was looking at one thing. And when one looks at one thing and blanks out everything else, suddenly there's clarity. It's very clear what is in front, what has to be done. And when there's clarity, there's focus. And when there's focus, there's control. Remember that chain. Clarity leads to focus. Focus leads to control. So let's go back to our original question. We talked about a world that is out of control. We talked about the fact that we have circumstances that we're not in control of. And then we talked about how we relate to those circumstances. And we're asking, how can we take back control? And I think now I would like to rephrase that question. It's not so much about how we take back control, but how do we maintain focus in a situation where there's so much which is out of control? Because really, when one is able to maintain focus, when it is able to have that clarity of vision, a clear mind, an understanding where one is going, a clarity of mission and purpose, there's focus. And when there's focus, remember, there is control. So really, it's about trying to maintain our focus in a world where there's a storm outside and the weather is battering things left, right, and center. And there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of lack of clarity. And it's difficult to predict the next step ahead. But is it possible to nevertheless maintain our focus? And this is what I want to talk about tonight. You think about it for a moment. When a person is in a car, he's driving along the road and he's having an animated conversation on his mobile. You can be a mile away And you can tell that this person who's driving the car is having a conversation on his phone. Why? Simply because his car is not driving straight. You can tell there's a lack of focus in that, in that journey. You can tell that he's not in total control of his car. His car is weaving, it's waving. And this is what happens to us. When we don't have that clarity, when we don't have the focus, then we're also weaving and waving. We're also out of control at some level or other. And what we want to really look at tonight is how can we maintain our focus come what may? And I think the key to this lies in a very, very fundamental concept of emunah. And this is what I want to elaborate on tonight. Our existence as individuals, each and every one of us, I believe each and every one of us has what I call two worlds. We have what I call an external world and an internal world. So what is this external world and what is this internal world? So the external world, the world outside of us, is what I call captures everything that happens to us. So if you picture for a moment an individual on a blank piece of paper, you have arrows all pointing in his direction. All those arrows symbolize everything that is going on to him, everything that's happening to him, everything that's happening in his life but to him. But this very same individual also has an internal world. That internal world is symbolized by arrows heading in the opposite direction. That same piece of paper, the individual in the middle, there are arrows heading outward from this individual. That internal world captures the way he relates to everything that is going on outside of him. So again, you have the external world, which is everything that's happening to each and every individual. And you have the internal world, which is how we relate to everything that is going on inside of ourselves. Now, both of these worlds, the external and the internal, make up the totality of our existence. But there is a huge distinction between the two of them. And this is what I want to crystallize tonight with you. There's a basic fundamental tenet of our emunah system, is that when it comes to our external world, everything that happens to us, although it may seem all the time that whatever is happening to us happens either because of our own actions or because of behavior of others or because of one circumstance or other, the real truth of it is that everything that happens in our external world happens to us for one simple reason. It happens because that is the will of Hashem. It's not about what we do. It's not about what others are doing to us. The end result, the outcome of whatever happens to us, in other words, these arrows are pointing to us simply because Hashem has dictated that they should point in our direction. Simply because it's been divinely orchestrated that this is the experiences I have to experience. These are the challenges I have to undergo. These are the circumstances that have to be part of my makeup. This is the external world that we all have as individuals. And this external world, although it may seem we have influence over, in the truth of it is that as active as we may be in this external world, the products, the outcome of whatever happens, the outcome of whatever happens is not a product of our actions. It's a product of one simple thing, the will of Hashem. Now I'm going to use a little metaphor that I think brilliantly captures this. So although it's difficult to swallow, I believe that using this metaphor, it's suddenly going to become very, very clear to us that this is really the way things are. You know, if you've ever gone up the coast, whether it's Estepona to Marbella, you know, along the promenade there are a number of different the different places where you can hire out, whether it's electric bikes or electric cars for the kids to play on, to go up and down the promenade. When you hire an electric car for little toddlers, you can put them in the car, and the toddler gets in the car, he presses his foot on the pedal, and the car goes forward. And the toddler feels like this grown up. He's swinging the steering wheel left, right, heading in all sorts of directions, making all sorts of noises, very content that he's able to drive the car at the tender age of 2 or 3. But what he doesn't realize is that the shop owner has given the accompanying adult a remote control. Obviously, we cannot leave a child in control of such a car, because otherwise it would wreak havoc. Who knows what's going to be? Who would it crash into? The adult has this remote control, which can override the actions of the child. So if the child is heading in the wrong direction, heading for a collision, the adult just has to move it in the other direction, and he prevents an accident. Similarly, if the child is going too far, too fast, or going in the wrong place, he can press the brake. Or if the child's not moving fast enough, he can press on the accelerator. He can direct, he can override the actions of the child using this remote control. This child is blissfully unaware of what's going on. He doesn't realize that the parent has this or the adult has this, and he's moving his car left and right, pressing his foot down on the accelerator. What he doesn't realize is there is no way he is able to go in the direction he wants to go if the adult does not want it. If the adult thinks it's too dangerous for him, if the adult feels that is the wrong direction to go, he can have his foot on the accelerator all the way to the floor and the car won't budge. And he could be pressing on the brake and the car will be moving. And I think this mashal, so we call it, brilliantly captures the way things work in our external world. We play this game. We are sitting in this car. And by the way, we have to play the game because that's what Hashem wants. But he also does not want us to have control over the game. He holds the remote control in his hands, and that remote control is governed by what we call Ritzon Hashem, the will of Hashem. It's through the will of Hashem, he decides where we end up, which direction we're going, which challenge is beneficial for us, which circumstance is good, which one is no good. And we can have all sorts of glorious ideas where we would like to be, where we would like to end up, what we would like to achieve in life. And the bottom line is, it's not in our control. Essentially, we are powerless. We can do what we can do, but if Hashem does not will it, or Hashem knows that's not the right thing for us, it just will not happen. And let's think for a moment what is happening over here. Because essentially this idea, what it does is it totally strips us of any sense of control. We're now powerless. If it's true what I'm telling you, that this external world, the world where we try and act, try and perform, try and create results, is really something that we have no control. We are no more than that little child in the car. We are powerless. So first of all, why bother? And the answer to that is because Hashem wants us to bother. But more importantly, what's this all about? And the answer is very simple. Because the same way we cannot trust a child to make appropriate decisions as far as what is considered good for them, in which direction is appropriate for them to drive the car, Hashem knows that in terms of the external world that we live in, he cannot hand over the control to us. For one simple reason, we don't know enough. We do not have the know-how to be able to drive this car safely. We think we need to go in one place. We think we need to go to one destination. But Hashem knows that for our true self, our eternal self, the real person who lies behind the body that we live in, the neshama, Hashem knows, no, that's not for you. That's not where you need to be. That is not the right thing for you. So Hashem keeps the controls of the external world in his hand. But that's all as far as the external world is concerned. The internal world, the world which captures the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act in relation to things that go on outside of us, Hashem says that is 1000% in your control. You are the sole driver here. You are the sole determinant which direction you're going to take. You will choose the destination. You will decide if you're going to get to a certain place, how you're going to get to a certain place, whether you get there intact or whether you get there with all sorts of damages, etc. This internal world is a world that Hashem does not get involved in. Hashem has handed that over to us, and we have absolute and full control over that. The world that controls how we relate, how we interact, how we respond to everything that's going on outside of us, that Hashem says, I'm not taking any control there. It's yours. You take control. I'd like to share with you a beautiful anecdote that highlights this distinction. It's a well-known story that took place with the Brisker Rav. One of his former Talmidim, who had subsequently, after leaving yeshiva, he'd gone back to the States, and he'd graduated as a lawyer, now opened a very successful practice. He came back to Eretz Yisrael to visit his Rav. And he comes into the Brisker Rav, he introduces himself, and Rav remembers he was in the yeshiva some time ago. And the Rav asks him, how are you doing? So the lawyer starts describing to him what happened in life since he left yeshiva, how he succeeded in the best university, how he became a top lawyer. He is the go-to man. He opened a practice, and the practice is thriving and has expanded, and people are coming to them all the time, and there's so much work to be done. And he finishes his description of where he's holding in life, and he pauses, and the Brisker Rav turns to him and says to him, how are you doing? The man's a bit taken aback. He just spent the last 5 minutes describing his successes over the period of the last 10, 15 years. The Brisker Rav seemed not to have heard him. Now he knows the Brisker Rav is now very elderly, especially since he hadn't seen him for many, many years. He was probably quite hard of hearing. So he repeats himself. He again goes into a lengthy description of what has transpired over the last 10 years, how he'd grown his practice, how he's a successful lawyer, how business is doing great. And then he pauses again. And much to his shock, the Brisker Rav once again says to him, how are you doing? Now, he's no fool, this fellow. If the Brisker Rav had not heard him by now, after he'd raised his voice and repeated what he said, then obviously he had misunderstood the question. Obviously, the Brisker Rav was asking him something which we didn't grasp initially. So he bent over to the Rav. He says, perhaps I misunderstood your question. And the Rav turned to him and told him, I asked, how are you doing? I did not ask how Hashem is doing. The Brisker Rav told him, your successes, your progress, whatever you have achieved in your external world, that is Hashem's world. That is where Hashem operates. I don't need to know how Hashem is doing. I know that whatever he is doing just fine. He knows exactly what he's doing, whether you find it pleasant or unpleasant. Whatever he is doing is just perfect. I don't need to know how he is doing. But you have how you are doing. I want to know how you have been doing since you left yeshiva. What is going on in your internal world? How have you interacted with things that have been happening to you? Are you still on the same path? Are you still heading in the same direction? Are you still driving to the same destination? Or have you picked up a few scrapes and brushes along the way? And I think what the Brisker Rav was sharing with this Talmud is a very powerful, very, very powerful point. You see, because the lines that distinguish between the external world of a person and his internal world, for this lawyer, were blurred. But I believe for many of us, they are very blurred. We do not see this distinction between these two worlds. And there's a very simple reason for this. It's because we operate in the external world. We are playing a game. And when one plays the game for long enough, it starts to take on a feeling as being very real. It is the reality. I am controlling things. I am moving things. My actions do produce results. I am in control of the external world. And the more we operate within, the more we play the game, the more it is difficult to segregate in our mind between what is reality and what is not reality. And we start to take on this appearance or this perception that what we're doing in our external world is really controlling events, controlling circumstances. And we end up with a very difficult situation. We end up with a situation where the line is blurred. We don't see clearly between what we have control over and what we don't have control over. And remember what I said before. When there is a lack of clarity, there is a lack of focus. And when there is a lack of focus, there is no control. Let's picture this situation for a moment. The external world for this individual, for an individual, is not going too well at the moment. Things are not happening the way he would like them. He's trying to achieve, and achievement's not coming his way. He wants something, and what he wants is just not happening. Circumstances are not running according to the way he would like it to be. That's what's going on in his external world. What does this person feel? He feels frustrated. He feels that his hopes are being dashed. He feels that helpless. He's not able to control the way things, the outcome of things, the way things should be. And he's got this frustration, this hopelessness, this feeling of out of control. And we all know how damaging that can be. But if this very same person understood this absolute truth, it was crystal clear to him that the external world is not yours to control. It was never in your control in the first place. Just think of the benefits as follows. A, he would manage his expectations in the first place. Knowing that it's not in my control, even when I'm active in the world, I understand that it's Hashem's will that dictates outcomes and results, not the level of which I operate. I do, but I do not achieve. That Hashem is the one who achieves. Hashem is the one that does. Hashem is the one that performs ultimately. So my expectations are managed in the first place. Secondly, with reduced expectations, there is no frustration. But most importantly, and this is the key, when I understand that I have not got control of my external world, then I have clarity to focus on what I do have control. The worst thing a person can do to themselves is try and control something which is outside their circle of influence. Try to manipulate something that they have no control over. But when a person is clear of the boundaries, he's clear of where his circle of influence is. He's clear that within this circle is only his internal world. And that's where he pours his energy. And that's where he puts all his efforts. So there's clear focus. There's clarity, there's focus, and there is control. That is where a person ends up when they have that clarity, when they have that clarity, which brings them to a focus, to an understanding of where they really are in control, where they're not in control. So I think in terms of answering our question, how to take back control, step number one, we have to recalibrate our thinking. We have to remind ourselves what it is we are in truth in control of and what it is that we're not in control of. And when we have that clarity, then we can focus. And when we focus, we don't feel so out of control anymore. But I'd like to take this now a step further. That's just point number one. Point number one is the awareness. When one has awareness, one has an ability to maintain focus. But let's take this further. And this is based on a beautiful pasuk in Tehillim, which I'm sure you all know. The David HaMelech tells us, Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha v'hu yechalkelecha. Again, Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha. This means simply, cast upon Hashem your burden. V'hu yechalkelecha, and he will sustain you. You see, all of us, almost without exception, walk around almost all the time with a heavy sack, a heavy bag on our shoulders, because we all have something. We all have some issue or another. Some it's health issues, some it's with the children, some it's in their marriage, some it's financial, and some it's all of those. And we're all carrying some worry, some burden, and we're carrying it on our shoulders. And it's very heavy. It weighs us down. It saps our energy. It literally stops us from functioning. It can take away our sleep at night because we're holding this heavy bag of all these problems that we have to carry around with us. And David HaMelech comes along and tells us something that maybe we never thought of before. He tells us, my dear friends, you're making a huge mistake. You're carrying around the wrong bag. You've lifted up this heavy sack. It's on your shoulders and you're worn down from it. But it's not yours. It's the wrong bag. Hashlech al Hashem, says David HaMelech. You took the bag which belongs to Hashem. It's got his label on. Why are you walking around with it? So David HaMelech says, I've got a simple solution for you. Take this bag and put it down. Cast it off you. Hashlech al Hashem. Cast it off your shoulders. So you take this bag, this metaphorical sack that holds within it all your worries, all your concerns, everything that you carry around with you all the time. Put it down. And I challenge you now. I challenge all of you who are here with me tonight. Think for a moment, just two things that you're walking around with that you hold on your shoulder, that's weighing you down, that gives you sleepless nights. Think for a moment, two things. Just think about those two things. Just think for a moment what they are. And now imagine yourselves taking those two things off your shoulders and put them down. Put them down. Let go. You can pick them up in a minute if you want. But for now, just put them down. And say, Hashem, I took your bag. I'm so sorry. It's not my bag. There's this huge sense of relief that can accompany such an action. Now, make no mistake. This is not an act of futility. When a person does this, not out of sheer desperation, but does this simply because he understands that the truth of the matter is this bag, which represents what's going on in its external world, is not his bag. We have to do our best. But it's not your bag. It's a bag that Hashem controls. It's a bag that Hashem is in control of. If a person understands that, and because he understands that, he puts it down. David HaMelech says, V'hu yechalkelecha. When you do that, Hashem will take care of things. When a person is willing to relinquish control, to once and for all tell himself, what am I doing over here? It's only a game. Why am I shouldering something that's not mine? Why am I pretending there's almost an absence of God in the world and that it's all up to me? It's not up to me. It's not about me. I have to operate. I have to go about performing the actions, but it's not about me. It's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's about his decisions and his will. With that new understanding, a person takes his bag and puts it down and says, Hashem, sorry, I didn't mean to get involved in your world. That's something you're in control. And I accept your control in this. That moment, says David HaMelech, is an extremely powerful moment. It's a moment of pure faith. And when a person acts with pure faith, says David HaMelech, there are results. Hashem doesn't turn a blind eye ever to pure faith. Hashem sees it and Hashem responds. How he responds is up to him, but he responds. No act of pure faith goes unnoticed. And this really, if one thinks about this for a moment, if we pause, if we just reflect on what we're saying now, this is extremely, extremely life-changing. Many of us have situations, even if it's not today, but certainly we've had these situations. And as I said before, life is a rough terrain. That's the landscape of life. There are always curveballs coming. And there are always times that we have that feeling of helplessness, of lack of control. Our external world is always shaking. And in those moments when things are spiraling out of control and we feel ourselves stuck in a very dark tunnel that doesn't seem to have any end in sight, that doesn't seem to have any light in sight. And in that dark tunnel, if we are able to take this sack of problems, cast it off our shoulders, we can transform ourselves. We can transform a moment which holds within it the depths of despair and transform it to the most mighty moment in our lives. We can create incredible opportunity over here. We can take this moment where we are right down in the worst moments possibly of our life, and we can transform it into the most beautiful gift, a gift that brings us so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is unimaginable from where we are right now. When we're just willing to let go, when we're just willing to give control over to the one who really has control, to relinquish control of our external world to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, it's yours, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're the one who controls everything that goes on in our lives. And as far as I'm concerned, I have one mission. I have one mission and one mission only. And my mission is not to perfect. Listen to these words carefully. My mission in life is not to perfect my external world, because this is where we make a big mistake. It's not about perfecting our external world. My mission is to beautify my internal world. And when I can remind myself in this moment where I'm struggling and where I'm gasping for breath and where I'm totally out of control and I don't know how I'm going to get through the next few weeks, the next few months, I have no idea how I'm going to get myself out of predicament. I don't see a solution to what I'm experiencing inside. But I can remind myself that my mission in life is not to perfect my external world, but to beautify my internal world. I can fulfill the words of the Navi. The Navi says, Gam ki eshev b'choshech, even when I'm in the pits of darkness, Hashem already, I can bring Hashem to illuminate their life, to illuminate my experience in a way that somebody who's not going through what I'm going through cannot achieve that. So really, we have to remember something, that out of control may seem like a curse, and it's not pleasant, and it is painful in many cases to be out of control. We all crave for predictability. We all desire certainty. We all would love to plan our steps ahead and have some level of security. And when we don't have that certainty and we don't have that security, it's very unsettling. It's very disconcerting. It's extremely unpleasant. But we know one thing, that even though it's painful when it's out of control, here lies the most beautiful and exquisite gift that life can offer us. The opportunity to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that we never would if we didn't have this particular situation. And many people, after they suffer all sorts of experiences, they would never have asked for it in the first place, but they will never sell what they went through after they've gone through it. Because after they've gone through it and they managed to bring Hashem to illuminate their experience, and they managed to beautify their internal world after they've gone through what they've gone through, that is something that no one will ever sell for anything in the world. When we talk about Zman Cherutenu, I know it's late already, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But when we talk about Zman Cherutenu, we talk about a point in time where Hashem took us out of enslavement from Mitzrayim, and he took us as his own slaves, which begs the question. We say in Haggadah, Hotzianu me'avdut lecherut. He took us out from slavery to freedom. But that doesn't make sense. We stopped being servants to Paro, and now we're servants to Hashem. Can someone tell me where there is freedom over here? What is this Zman Cherutenu, this time of freedom? How can this be freedom when we're no longer, when we're not free? We've just gone from one master to another master. And I'm just going to say it in a quick sentence. When Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, and then 49 days later, he gave us the Torah. He entered into a marriage pact between himself and ourselves. We became his servants. Part of this arrangement was, Hashem turned around to us and said, your external world is my problem. It's my sack. It's for me to deal with. I am in control. You keep your internal world. From that moment onwards, when that arrangement was made between us and Hashem, we merited true freedom. We no longer ever have a situation where in reality it's out of control. Because from Hashem's perspective, there's never a situation out of control. He is the one who's holding the remote control, remember. He knows what he's doing. If he's driving us into a wall, it's because we're meant to be into a wall. If we're driving us over the edge of the cliff, that's not out of control. It's because Hashem has decided that for us, we need to drive over the edge of the cliff. Sounds crazy, but it is. That's the way it is. Hashem has taken full control, but at the same time, he gave us total control. He gave us total control over our internal world. And from that moment onwards, we never have to worry about our true direction in life, because we are the ones who create our destiny. We are the ones who are building our legacy. Never is there a time that we don't have control over that mission. So we just remember what it is we're in the world for. If we remember the clarity of mission and purpose, that we're not here to perfect our external worlds, but we are here to beautify our internal worlds. If we have that clarity and we focus on what we need to do, we will never be in a situation where we're out of control. We won't find it difficult to maintain our focus even when there's a storm outside and things are happening all the time, because we understand where we need to focus, where we need to pour our energy, and what truly is in our control. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry for going on a bit. And thank you again, Mrs. Atias and Mrs. Broder, for a wonderful series of shiurim preparing people for Pesach. It's been wonderful to be part of this. And I wish you all Chag Kasher v'Sameach. And you're welcome. Anybody who wants to be in touch, email me questions. By all means, feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very, very much. Really appreciate it. That was lots of fantastic and practical, inspiring points that we can definitely put into practice now. I just wanted to mention that this year was Le'elu Nishmat Chana Bat Moshe, Vanessa Atias's mother, whose Nachala was today, and her grandmother Simi Bat Chananya. Ezrat Hashem should be Le'elu Nishmat.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Rabbi Bitan, would you mind to put your email address in the chat? Do you know how to do that?
Yeah, or if you want to do it for me, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Very nice.
Bye, Grandpa. Está durmiendo.
¿Quién está durmiendo? ¿Sam?
No, la chica. She wanted to say hello to you the whole time.
Oh,
No, yo estaba aquí detrás. Lo que pasa es que como estoy así, sin arreglarme, estoy con la bata, pues no quise.
escondida. Mercedes está escondida. De vez en cuando se te ve un poquito.
Hago así, pero... ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está tu Magni?
Muy bien, estupendo.